a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. Is Britain rejoining the EU by stealth? The government's youth visa plan, new EU trade talks and fishing concessions all point to creeping in by the back door, raising major concerns about whether the Reverend Starmer is quietly undoing Brexit. Kemi Badenoch has thrown her hat into the trans rights debate, suggesting transgender people use disabled toilets after the Supreme Court ruling on gender in the Equality Act. As the government confirms transgender public sector workers will be banned from using toilets for their self-identified gender, is she right? New economic forecasts show UK growth could halve by 2026, with President Trump's tariffs set to slash GDP to just 0.8%. Meanwhile, Chancellor Rachel Reeves is facing a growing backlash over tax changes as wealthy individuals flee the country. How much longer can this go on? It's no secret that politicians with leadership ambitions revamp their image in a bid for public appeal. But why is this necessary in a system that should value substance over style? Plus, is it time for the first English Pope since the 12th century? State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most intellectual panel, the former Conservative MP and Minister Sir John Redwood and the former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle. As ever, I want to hear your views. It's a crucial part of the programme. Mailmog at gbnews.com. But first, it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Sophia Wensler.
Jacob, thank you. Good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. These are your headlines. The President of the EU Council and the Portuguese Prime Minister have said there's no indication that a cyber attack caused a massive power cut that plunged Spain and Portugal into chaos, with trains halted, traffic lights out and millions cut off from Wi-Fi, 5G and card payments. The Spanish Prime Minister says the cause is still being investigated, while Portugal's grid operator claimed a rare atmospheric phenomenon caused the cuts. Meanwhile, some staff at a hotel in Spain have been spotted with their own inventive way of getting through the power cut. They've been pictured using a barbecue to cook while the electricity is down. It's understood power has been restored in some areas in north and south of Spain, while Portugal believes it could take up to a week for normal service to resume. In other news, Donald Trump has demanded a permanent ceasefire in Ukraine after Vladimir Putin announced a 3-day pause in fighting ahead of Russia's Victory Day celebrations next week. The ceasefire will run from midnight on the 7th of May to midnight on the 10th of May, with Russian forces told to halt all military action. But Moscow has warned it will respond if Ukraine breaches the truce. Meanwhile, trade talks between the United States and Britain are moving in a positive direction, according to the White House. The White House spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, told reporters, "As for the trade talks, I understand they're moving in a very positive way with the United Kingdom." Now, the number of migrants crossing the Channel in small boats has now passed 10,000 this year, weeks earlier than last year, in a blow to Sir Keir Starmer's pledge to smash the gangs. 450 migrants in 8 small boats made the crossing today, taking the total for the year so far to more than 10,300. The Prime Minister's spokesman said there are no quick fixes to illegal migration. We were left with a broken asylum system. And David Amos's daughter is calling for rap group Kneecap to apologise over comments in which they allegedly called for politicians to be killed. The footage from a 2023 gig also included the phrase, "The only good Tory is a dead Tory," which the Conservative leader says demands action following the murder of Sir David Amos. However, Kneecap say they're facing a coordinated smear campaign for speaking out on Palestine. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch says the band should be prosecuted.
That there are grounds for prosecution. This is a band who I withdrew money for last year. They took the government to court. In between that time, we changed from Conservative to Labour. Labour gave them the money. I think that's completely wrong. What they did is abhorrent. They should not be glorifying terrorism. They are anti-British, but to actually call for people to kill their local MPs, I think is disgusting, and they should be prosecuted. People are in prison for sending tweets that don't go that far.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
His Majesty's government is considering a youth open border scheme with the European Union for under-30s, potentially reimposing free movement by stealth and making the migration crisis even worse. This policy shift also coincides with potential moves towards realigning with EU frameworks, such as granting more access to UK fishing waters and adopting European food and veterinary standards, with growing concerns about the erosion of the UK's independent policy stance, and that will make a trade deal with the US almost impossible. The Reverend Starmer, throughout his time serving under Jeremy Corbyn, advocated positively for a second Brexit vote until his political capital ran out.
We've already voted, I think, 3 times as a party for a second referendum with a 3-line whip behind it.
And so I can tell you today, an incoming Labour government will legislate for a referendum immediately on taking power and hold that referendum within 6 months. Labour must support all options remaining on the table, including campaigning for a public vote. That was our commitment.
We would call for a general election if the deal didn't get through, but that if that didn't happen, the option of a public vote ought to be available.
To this day, a Remainer, the Prime Minister could see this as another step towards the much-wanted by him closer ties with Brussels, subverting the will of the people by the back door. Despite Home Secretary Yvette Cooper's past opposition to rising migration, she has reportedly been forced to withdraw her objections, citing a capped reciprocal agreement that would have minimal impact on net migration. But we'll have to see about that. So, are we finding the fishermen being thrown overboard if the government concedes long-term fishing rights without delivering tangible improvements for UK fisheries that make it harder to rebuild UK fishing, which was so badly damaged by EU membership? With the EU negotiators reportedly pushing for fixed quotas and long-term access, can the UK honestly claim it's taking back control? And at what cost? Is it right to take away food security and sovereignty for a seat at the EU's defence table? The truth is, they need us more than we need them. The UK is Europe's most important defence force with the best armaments industry. We're also ripped off by the EU in trade terms. We buy over 3 times as much food and agricultural produce from them as they do from us, while keeping food out from equally safe countries. We must not return to the EU by underhand means, and the Conservatives must promise, as a matter of priority, that they would cancel any such deal. As ever, I want to hear from you. Let me know your views. mailmog@gbnews.com. But now I'm joined by the Fisheries campaigner, June Mummery. Well, June, thank you very much for joining me. Are you worried that once again the fishermen of the United Kingdom are going to be abandoned?
Yes, I'm very worried. Be abandoned? They've been abandoned. They are abandoned. This country has abandoned them for over 40 years. Yes, I'm extremely worried. It's a national scandal, Jacob.
And our fishing communities voted strongly for Brexit, didn't they? Because they thought that they would get our own fishing waters back. And that hasn't happened, but it was meant to happen in 2026. And it looks as if Labour's going to give that away again for a defence pact when we contribute more to European defence than any other EU nation.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it is a national scandal. Let's just be mindful that France, 35,000 tonne of the fish that arrives in Boulogne each year, 2/3 of that comes from British waters. France has 93% of the quota for cod in the English Channel. In the Celtic Sea, France gets nearly 3 times the British allocation of Dover sole, roughly 4 times more cod and 5 times more haddock. We wear the crown and we're throwing the emeralds and the diamonds over to the EU again. 2026, we were promised that we would take back full control of our waters and rebuild our deprived, I say deprived, seaside towns that are desperate for jobs, for work, for all, from skilled labour to unskilled.
And
Sorry.
But when we need economic growth, that we're throwing away this resource is deeply irresponsible, isn't it? Because this could rejuvenate communities that have been depressed since we entered the European Union in 1973.
100%. I mean, when Iceland kicked us out of their waters back in the day, we were buying fish from them within a fortnight. We had thousands and thousands of jobs on the Humber that needed the raw material, Jacob. And the same thing would have happened if we had taken back control. And whether it's fishing, aggregates, wind, oil and gas, these rich, lucrative resources should be in total control of the United Kingdom.
Well, thank you very much, June, and let's hope that the fish are safeguarded. Well, joining me now is a friend of the programme, former leader of the Liberal Democrats and Business Secretary, Sir Vince Cable. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you,
the referendum was decided in 2016. We were meant to get our fish back in 2026 fully. Surely the fishing communities shouldn't be let down once again.
Well, it's an important part of the negotiations that are due to happen next year. As you know, under the Brexit Treaty, a lot of the economic provisions are going to be looked at again, and fish should be part of that. It shouldn't be mixed in with defence. I mean, I'd heard that somehow there's some trade-off between fish and defence, which is ridiculous and totally inappropriate.
But I don't understand opposition on defence either, because in terms of defence, we contribute much more than any other EU member state to NATO, that other than the US, we are a better defence force, we have a better armaments industry, we already defend Ireland for free, who are a neutral country and were absolutely hopeless to us in the Second World War. Why should we make any concessions to the EU in terms of defence when they want us?
Well, I think there are several reasons for that. I think we've all accepted that our defence effort needs to be beefed up. Certainly Britain is one of the more conscientious defence spenders. Others are more so, Poland, the Baltics, amongst others. I mean, the reason for doing this collectively is procurement. I mean, equipment, defence equipment is expensive to produce. There are economies of scale. It would make sense for the British defence, and it would probably be highly beneficial for the British defence to be able to bid for European contracts. So as far as possible, we should collaborate.
OK, I'm all in favour of cooperation amongst NATO allies, but highly beneficial for our NATO allies to have access to our defence know-how, which, again, after the US, is the best in Europe.
Well, we do have strong defence forces, and we should be proud of them. But, I mean, actually, we shouldn't exaggerate. I mean, our army is extremely small now by international standards, and I think it's less than a quarter of the Turkish army, for example, much more substantial. So we do have assets. We do have something to contribute to the joint effort.
But particularly in terms of procurement, because of the technical sophistication, and we may not produce in the volume that we want, that gets the economies of scale, and I agree with you, we should make this available to our continental allies. But why should we be paying for that by not just giving up fish, but giving them anything? That they want our defence know-how and expertise. They need us to join in.
Well, it's got to be done in a balanced way. I mean, there is discussion at the moment of raising bonds to finance additional defence spending, which is a rather unorthodox way of borrowing to invest. But if it's a way of helping both European countries and the UK to boost our defence spending, I would be in favour of it. But the corollary of it is that it's how that money is then spent. If there is collaboration on procurement, there's effectively a single market in equipment. There's got to be rules around procurement.
But bonds for defence are just a new label on the same thing.
It's still
debt.
It's an accounting device.
And we learned surely from Gordon Brown, who you memorably said had gone from Stalin to Mr. Bean, one of the best moments in the House of Commons in recent decades. Gordon Brown's clever labelling of debt didn't actually help the economy in the end, did it?
It may not. It might make it easier. As you know, we're struggling against budget rules implicating the bond market. This may be a way of segregating additional defence spending, make it easier to raise funding. I mean, I'm like you, it is largely a cosmetic device, but I'm no reason to be hostile to it.
And youth movement that we've just had earlier on the news, 10,000 people have arrived illegally, migration remains one of the biggest problems the government faces. It's not a challenge it's dealing very well with. To be fair, we weren't dealing very well with it either when the Conservatives were in government. But to add any new scheme at this time, when you haven't got migration under control, surely that's holding voters in contempt. You've got to have sorted out migration first before you can have a new scheme.
On this, I totally disagree. I mean, this was a very modest proposal. I mean, the Labour government is frightened of its own shadow. I mean, it's a very minor scheme. It's not free migration because it would be visa-controlled, it would be time-limited. And the anxiety of Yvette Cooper appears to be that it goes into the numbers, which is a little bit like students who are not migrants. But we haven't found a sensible way of presenting numbers to the public that reassure them about migration numbers, but don't massively inflate the numbers artificially.
All right, but here we are, two former members of Parliament, and we know from knocking on doors over years that voters don't trust politicians. And one of the reasons they don't trust us is we do things that keep things out of the numbers. And we focus on the headline statistic rather than the reality. And coming up with a scheme that just keeps things out of the numbers will make people even more suspicious, won't it? They'll think, trust a politician to be trying to use verbal gymnastics to get around an increase in migration.
Well, there is a trust issue, and you're quite right about it. I mean, I had to grapple for 5 years with the issue of overseas students. I was strongly in favour of it. It was good for Britain, good for the universities, good for the individuals concerned. But the Home Office was frightened because it simply became part of the net migration target for the very simple reason they didn't count people out. So there was no metric for assessing this properly. And the sensible way to do it, I mean, I always argued, but nobody ever listened, is you present the net migration numbers excluding students, you present them with students, and side by side, the public can draw whatever conclusion they wish to. And you do the same with hopefully, with this youth mobility scheme.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. It is worth noting that Sir Vince held a job for 5 years that I held for 7 weeks. Anyway, next, Kemi Badenoch has thrown her hat into the trans rights debate, suggesting transgender people use disabled toilets after the Supreme Court ruling on gender in the Equality Act, as the government confirms transgender public sector workers will be banned from using toilets for their self-identified gender. Is Kemi Badenoch right?
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
You two met, I mean, since we last saw each other, then you two have done Strictly. And, but the fact that and there's quite an age gap.
51 years.
51. And yet...
I was granny.
But the fact you clearly get on really well and you've stayed in touch and you've developed a real friendship.
We really do. I mean, we live 5 minutes from each other. We speak most days and, you know, Angela had this amazing campaign with Let's Dance and obviously I was very, very much supporting that. And when you just get on like a house on fire, we just do. We get each other. We have great banter. And like you said, there's 51 years between us, but we feel like we've known each other for 51 years.
You have a particular interest in getting dance back into schools, don't you? I mean, your own experience of this, because you're Your dad is a professional footballer, and you actually won a place, didn't you, into the football academy? It was sort of expected that you were going to be a footballer.
Yes, it was. I was expected to be a football player naturally because I was the eldest son, and you know Southampton wanted to sign me in the Premier League, and they still are. No, I chose to be a dancer, and it was because my dad and mum sent me to dance classes because I was very hyperactive as a kid. I was pretending to kick a football all the time. They sent me to my next door neighbour's dance school, and the class was called Tango Tots. I somehow ended up being a dancer and had to tell my Geordie dad when I was 12 years old that I wanted to be a dancer.
How did that go down?
It went fine. It's not like the film, not like the film, but it's very, 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 very supportive. And obviously, the brother ended up being the football.
But you're very keen to get dance back into schools, aren't you? Tell me why.
I'm so keen because for kids that can't afford it, why not just give them the opportunity to learn to dance? We live in a world today where we're on the phones, we're on TikTok, kids are learning to dance anyway, so why not regulate it and let them learn it in school for free?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about the EU reset, and the mailmogs have come in. Ashley says, what is to stop our fishing boats just carrying on ignoring the law? Everyone in Europe seems to do this and ignore the law without repercussions. That's we're English, we don't behave like that. Anyway, Mike says, Dear Jacob, this government has no mandate to place this country back under the thumb of the EU. Starmer may think he's being clever, but he is spitting in the face of the majority, and it will not be forgotten or forgiven. Well, Mike, I agree with you. Well, Kemi Badenoch has added fuel to the fiery trans right debate this week by arguing that transgender people shouldn't use disabled loos following the Supreme Court ruling on gender and sex in the Equality Act. Conservative leader proposed this as an alternative to creating gender-neutral facilities after the court ruled that women and sex refer to biological women. Meanwhile, the government has confirmed that transgender public sector workers will be banned from using lavatories for their self-identified gender. So, is Miss Badenoch correct? Joining me now is gender-critical campaigner and student Connie Shaw. Connie, thank you very much for joining me. Is Kemi just saying something that's common sense? By and large, disabled loos in most offices aren't used that much. They've got excess capacity. There's a very small number of people who self-identify as a different gender, and they can use them, and everyone will be happy.
Look, well, I think that the way that Kemi worded that response was not in the best way that she could have. The truth is that a lot of disabled toilets, or all disabled toilets, are by default mixed sex. People of any sex can go into disabled toilets. And actually, a lot of disabled toilets now are also marked as being gender neutral. I just think that the way that she worded her response made it seem like that she thinks that disabled people should now have to deal with this tiny proportion of people who do not feel comfortable going into the toilets that are meant for their own biological sex. And I think that is quite unfair, in the same way that women should not have to accommodate certain men who don't feel comfortable going into the male toilets. I don't think that disabled people should have to give up their access, or some of their access to their spaces that they have fought for, just as women fought for their spaces, to a tiny proportion of people who do not want to go into the toilet or follow the same rules as everyone else. The tiny proportion of people who do not want to follow the same rules as everyone else. I don't think it's fair that disabled people should have to give up their rights, but I don't think that's what Kemi was suggesting. I just think that the way that she worded her response wasn't the best it could have been.
OK, but isn't it different? Because most disabled toilets are individual rooms. They're not like the gents and the ladies where you have... Well, I don't know what the ladies are like, actually, because I've never been into them, but I always try to guess. But the gents have different cubicles and so on and so forth. Whereas disabled loos are just that one room privately. And so it doesn't much matter whether it's a man or a woman or something in between who's in the loo.
No, of course not. But the point is that the reason why there are accessible toilets in public places is for people who need that extra accessibility, who wouldn't normally be able to, or wouldn't otherwise be able to use toilets that aren't made to be especially accessible. So, for example, it would seem unfair that someone who is disabled and needs that access to a space would be waiting for someone who has just gone in there because they don't want to follow the same rules as everyone else. But actually, Disability Rights UK has said that half of trans people are disabled. So they would be well within their rights to use that toilet anyway. So we're literally talking about, so trans people make up less than 1% of the population, according to the very vague and very difficult to verify statistics. We're talking about half of that. So, you know, these people, you know, in some ways you could argue, well, is it really going to be much of a burden on accessible spaces? Although apparently 24% of our population is disabled. So is it fair that disabled people are now being told, you know, arguably by Kemi Badenoch, that they need to deal with this issue? Or is it the case that it's not really going to affect them at all? I think it's unfair to say it in the same way it's unfair to say that women should have to deal with these men.
Right. Well, Connie Shaw, thank you very much for joining me to talk about water closets. We're now going to flush that subject away and move on to a new report by the Taxpayers Alliance, which reveals that in 2023-24, 1,472 Quango employees received over £100,000 in total remuneration paid for by you, with 343 making more than £200,000. Among them, 315 earned more than the Prime Minister's £172,000 salary. The findings are part of a major project that aims to highlight the growing influence of unelected Quangos in this country. Despite government after government promising to get a grip on excessive Quangos, this Labour government is currently conducting a review of these bodies once again, but it's setting them up at the same time. However, critics are urging reforms to focus on scrapping unnecessary roles and restoring political control over key services. Let's bin the Quangos and give decision-making power back to ministers. Well, I'm now joined by my most intellectual panel, former Conservative MP and Minister Sir John Redwood and the former Labour MP Lloyd Russell Moyle. John, you worked for Margaret Thatcher, I was a Minister of the Cabinet Office. We've all tried to get rid of Quangos, and they just regrow, don't they?
Well, only if you let them, and I think the last government let far too many, and now this government says it wants to reduce them, but it's been busy introducing a lot of needless ones that will cost a lot of money. But I've also been campaigning about the fact that some of these Quango chiefs get paid extraordinarily large sums of money with bonuses when their performance is absolutely disgraceful. I mean, why did the head of the Post Office and why did the head of HS2, two gross failures that are costing taxpayers a fortune, get more than £500,000 and a bonus? It's just ridiculous. And public service broadcasting, you'd think people would come to it with that in mind, in their spirit. Why £1 million for the chief executive of Channel 4?
Well, and it's also that they sit on each other's Quangos. There is a Quangocracy. They pointed from one Quango to another. There's one chap, isn't there, who's on half a dozen of them, doesn't turn up to quite a lot of the meetings, and cumulatively earns well over £100,000 a year.
Yes, again, it's an abuse of the system, and you do get the feeling that it's jobs for the friends of the privileged group, very often senior officials who have strong powers to recommend these people to ministers, because quite often ministers are busy and they don't have a list of people in their mind, and they're not allowed to put their friends on, obviously. And so you end up with people that the civil service approves, who may then do things that the minister thoroughly doesn't approve of.
And Lloyd, isn't the bigger point that these decisions should be made by ministers who are accountable? And it's actually been governmental cowardice that I won't make the decision because then I can't be criticised. We'll give it some third body. And that's the worst aspect of current British politics.
I do think it is a problem, and I think it undermines democracy because the public want to vote for people to make decisions. And as soon as a politician says, well, I can't make this decision because you can't trust me, what they're saying to the public is you can't trust politicians. And so it undermines the whole of democracy. There are some bodies that you call Quangos that, quite right, I wouldn't want the minister running day to day. Channel 4 is a perfectly good one. It doesn't cost the taxpayer any money. It generates money from revenue. It works quite well. It doesn't need to be privatised. It can sit there as it is. There's no need for change. And I wouldn't want the minister directing Channel 4. I do think, however, a better rule of thumb should probably be that no one should be able to earn in government or Quangos more than the Prime Minister as a base salary. And then bonuses should be paid as deferred payments on their departure. And so what you do is on their departure, you analyse, have they been a success or not? And if you're departing without a success, then you don't get any of your bonuses for any of the years you've worked. Now, that, I think, would be a better motivation. Sometimes you have to pay more than the Prime Minister. For example, if you wanted a very good engineering lead for HS2, clearly we've had a very bad one, we wouldn't get a bonus. You might want to say, actually, we want to give you international rates because building a railway is an international business.
Well, and there are people who it's worth paying, but I worked with a brilliant man in the Cabinet Office who was running government procurement, budget of tens of billions of pounds, was saving the taxpayer billions of pounds every year, and identifiably so. He wasn't being paid that much because he already had a successful career and was doing it out of public spiritedness. But you can't rely on getting good people for public spiritedness, particularly younger people in their career. And so it's not wrong in principle to pay people large amounts of money. You're just saying they need to show results.
Yes, and I think we have some unusual agreement here, because I think the base salary should not be more than the Prime Minister get paid for anybody. And I think there should be generous bonus payments for tough targets which they hit. I don't think I make them wait until they leave. I think it's quite reasonable to pay them as they go along, but it's got to be properly supervised by ministers. And it has to be a fraction of the savings to the taxpayer that they're generating.
And we all agree that we want more ministerial control and accountability Parliament.
I want more ministerial control. I don't necessarily want less Quangos, but some of those Quangos can come more directly under ministerial control. You can have ministerially directed bodies, and you can have, and I think some of those might be what we need to do.
But I think you can make big savings by cutting a large number of Quangos that actually are simply a hindrance to business like Natural England and all those people.
Well, indeed, and look at the government's efforts to become a sort of merchant banker, private sector investor type with the Infrastructure Bank and the British Business Bank and now the National Wealth Fund and Great British Energy. You've got 4 Quangos, all with expensive chief executives all over the same space without very much money to put into the pot, something the private sector can do.
You can definitely do some mergers, but there is a danger of what the last Conservative government did. You know, Heritage England, OK, we don't want it to be a Quango anymore, we'll set it up as a separate charity but still give it a bit of a grant. Well, it is a Quango in all but name, so you need to be sensible.
Well, thank you very much to John and Lloyd. Coming up next, new economic forecasts show UK growth could halve by 2026, with President Trump's tariffs set to slash GDP growth to a meagre 0.8%. As wealthy individuals, the non-doms, flee the country, and Red Rachel Reeves is facing a growing backlash.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Whilst the UK is going to be increasingly dry and sunny this week, parts of the Mediterranean are actually going to be slightly damper. Some showers to watch out for across parts of Turkey, and a brisk breeze running through the Aegean Sea will make it feel quite fresh for those Greek islands. A few showers in between the sunshine for parts of Italy, France and Spain as well, but it's parts of Portugal and down towards Madeira that are going to see some of the most unsettled conditions, some longer spells of rain and again some quite strong winds around, but away from there there'll still be some sunshine elsewhere.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Red Rachel Reeves is under more pressure as new economic forecasts show growth halving in 2026 compared to this year. The EY Item Club has cut its outlook, warning that Donald Trump's tariffs will slow exports and reduce GDP growth to just 0.8%. At the same time, the Chancellor is facing a backlash at home over changes to the non-dom tax regime. A growing number of wealthy individuals are fleeing the country, raising concerns about falling tax revenues and investor confidence. With borrowing rising and business investment slowing, how long can we keep going with an agenda that is deliberately shrinking the economy? Well, my most intellectual panel is still with me, Sir John Redwood and Lloyd Russell Moyle. Lloyd, government's economic policy isn't working, is it?
Well, I don't think we can quite say that yet. We've seen these Donald Trump tariffs. We are on the right side of them. And very often it's not about the overall tariff, but it's about the marginal difference between nearby competitors. And we are 10% less than Europe, and we are a darn sight even more less than China. And so it's very feasible that even if it's a 10% tariff, actually that gives us the edge. And companies who are wanting to have a base in Europe will say, well, which one do I invest in now? Well, I'll invest in the UK because it has access to the European market and a relatively low tariff with a potential trade deal with the US. And Rachel's been working very hard on that trade deal with the US.
Well, and then she bungled it by saying she preferred the EU to the US, which really tactless when she was about to go and see President Trump's
team.
Yes,
but these things are done not by just massives on the radio. They're done, they're done in the negotiation.
That was just amateur, wasn't it? For a chancellor, it was just hopeless and shows her general unfitness for the office she holds.
No,
She's just not good enough.
I don't think that's fair. I think we've seen with all politicians, and I think Trump knows this as well as anyone, have to speak to their domestic audience as well as their international audience, and she was speaking to a different audience at that moment, and they'll understand that. So I don't
know where that audience was. But let's touch on the non-doms, because they're leaving. And we have seen now that capital gains tax receipts will go down because they take their profits with them. This was just really silly, and it was tokenistic, left-wing politics, left-wing student politics. We don't like rich people, let's tax them a bit more, and then they go.
Now, the non-dom status needed to change. I don't think people think it is fair that those who base themselves here pay a different rate to someone else that could have exactly the same businesses that lives here as well. Your neighbour, just because you have a different immigration status than your neighbour...
You pay the same tax on the income you make here.
Yes.
You don't pay tax on your foreign income, but you pay foreign tax on your foreign income.
No, but if you were British, and you had a British passport and you were here and you had foreign companies, you would be paying income on the money that you brought back in.
Let me bring John in.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think it's mad to send them abroad, which is all that she's managed to do by this attack on them. And I read that on average they were paying £170,000 each of tax, and now a lot of those very rich billionaires won't be here, so they won't be paying it. I mean, people don't think understand how progressive tax is in this country, that the top 5% of income earners pay almost half the total income tax bill. And if you're losing the very rich ones, the billionaires, because of the non-dom, and you're now losing a lot of the millionaires, 10,800 of them left last year, paying quite a lot of tax as well, we're going to have a collapse in this country in our revenues.
Fairness. This is about fairness. Now, I can buy an argument that you say...
So is it fair to have less money to run the country with?
No, it is not fair that a British person has to pay a different tax regime than a non-British person if they live next door to each other and had exactly the same companies.
But it clearly is because the foreigner can just leave and go to his foreign country.
Well, the reality
and he's paying tax there. Why shouldn't you have that different arrangement?
No.
I'm not jealous of them. I think it was very good when London had these people paying the bills that you and I have otherwise got to pay.
If you're a rich Brit, you can be anywhere as well in the world. Those group of people who are the billionaires can live anywhere in the world. And it should be, if they choose to live here, we operate them by the same rules as everyone.
But then
now,
they won't choose to live here, so then you don't get their money.
To say that foreign investment abroad for Brits and for non-doms is treated
We had a huge number of non-doms who loved living here and brought a huge...
preferential system for foreigners compared to Brits. I don't think that's fair at all.
You allow them in.
You want foreigners to be treated better in this country, to be paying less tax than a Brit who has the same...
Lots of them don't.
I think that's outrageous,
Lots of them don't have the right to vote. They're mobile. They have chosen...
Not all of them.
It depends if they're Commonwealth citizens.
It is not a condition.
But they don't necessarily have the right to vote. They are mobile. They have decided to come here, and they pay tax in their foreign country.
Italy and Greece want them. Dubai wants them. We're the big losers. You and I got to pay more tax as a result.
But we need a fair system. Now, then make the argument that we should treat a British person who has foreign investments around the world the same as a non-dom person. Then I think that is a fair argument. What you're arguing for is a continuation of a system that basically discriminated against British people.
The difference is that you stay here as a citizen, and so then you pay tax on your international income, and there are double taxation arrangements to avoid it. If you're a foreign citizen and you choose to spend a bit of money on having a part-time residence here, why shouldn't you just pay income tax on the income you earn here?
And Lloyd, you're missing a fundamental point on domicile. Ultimately, domicile was where you were going to die, and most people who are British want to die in the UK and be buried here. Most foreigners intended to go home at some point. So the non-doms were fundamentally different. Their loyalty was to a foreign country. They weren't British.
I think that's
very
difficult to quantify.
Well, that was the tax law. That was the basic. But that was the basic tax law. That's how you changed domicile, was by leaving the country and maintaining no links to it. And then you were taxed if you lived here on your overseas income as well as your domestic income. It was a fundamentally different approach.
And these very rich non-doms, they normally have more than two residences in two different countries.
I'm afraid we've got to move on, because we're going to become a little more modern and talk about Alexander the Great, because from him onwards, politicians with leadership ambitions revamp their image in a bid for public appeal. Is this still necessary in a system that should value substance over appearance? Perhaps it's also time for the first English Pope since the 12th century. Both of those things coming up shortly.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It'll feel like summer over the next couple of days with lots of sunshine, Very warm for the end of April, and the winds will be light for most as well. High pressure is the reason why this chunky high dominating our weather patterns. We've had this weather front across northern Scotland. It's breaking up, but still providing some rain and drizzle across the Northern Isles through the nights, but tending to clear away from the mainland of Scotland. Generally, it's dry with lengthy clear skies. A bit of a breeze picking up along the south coast. Temperatures will dip down to single figures across parts of eastern England, in particular in rural spots, but many towns and cities holding in double figures. On to Tuesday, and basically sunny and really quite warm sums it up. As I said, there will be this breeze picking up initially on the south coast, Devon and Cornwall, getting quite gusty in the southwest at times, but elsewhere the wind's fairly light. Could be some early morning mist, but generally a sunnier day compared to today for Northern Ireland and much of southern and western Scotland. Still some thick cloud across Shetland, a little bit damp and drizzly here, particularly so in the morning, but even here I suspect that rain and drizzle will tend to fizzle through the day. Lots of sunshine then elsewhere, and with the help of that sunshine getting stronger and stronger, of course, at this time of year, we'll see those temperatures ticking up. A warmer feeling day, particularly where it's sunnier for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but quite widely will be over 20 degrees Celsius, and through central and eastern parts of England, southern Wales, into the mid-20s, perhaps 25 or 26 in and around the London area. Wednesday could be warmer still. Again, a bit of a breeze blowing through the channel, bit of cloud maybe across Shetland, but not as thick as tomorrow's. Should be a dry day pretty much everywhere, and warmer still with light winds, feeling really warm as well for the last day of April, 26, 27. Warmer again across the south on Thursday.
On Thursday, the 1st of May, voters across England go to the polls.
In a series of council elections,
mayoral elections, and one crucial by-election.
They'll vote on the local issues that matter to them and let the parties know where they stand. We'll be here throughout the night,
live around the country,
as the first results come in.
And from 6 a.m. on Friday morning, as it all becomes clearer, we'll be here to discuss what it means for you.
Vote 2025, the people decide, from 11 p.m. on Thursday. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's nothing new that politicians with ambitions of leadership scrub up on their image in a bid to broaden their appeal. Alexander the Great made himself look like the god Apollo. And more recently, Margaret Thatcher was famously told to ditch her beloved hats and pearls, though I believe she refused to do the latter. Well, today, the Daily Telegraph highlights the recent passengers on the political makeover train. Here's last year's Tory leadership contender Robert Jenrick before and after a glow-up. J.D. Vance slimmed down and suited up before joining Donald Trump's presidential ticket last year, and the former Prime Minister, David Cameron, political ambitions became apparent when he began stepping out looking slicker than an oil spill. And here's my before and after own image revamp, which I think shows me when I'd had a little bit too many Bath Olivers or something of that kind, or cream eggs, whatever it happened to be. But why do looks matter so much in a democracy? Why does the public care what their leaders look like? And what advice do image consultants bestow on their politically motivated clients? Well, joining me now is personal stylists Oriana Robb, along with my panel of two former politicians, the godlike Sir John Redwood and the leader of men, Lloyd Russell Moyle. Oriana, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you so
Why
much
does this matter so much? And what would you do with the three of us, or are we lost causes?
Absolutely not. Human beings are very visual. So we use our eyes before we use any of our senses. We, on average, have just a couple of seconds to make a first impression. So, of course, politicians and people in public eye really pay attention to present themselves in the best possible way.
And what are the key things? I mean, we noticed with those pictures, people want to make themselves look thinner. That's always important. And they want to be smarter. How do politicians achieve that whilst also trying to look like a normal chap?
I think it's very much about really having a strategy, and I think what public eye don't like is when people make very quick changes, because it can come across that it doesn't match how we feel inside, what we are about, and perhaps our image doesn't match that. So it's very important to be able to feel good, because then your body relaxes and you can really represent yourself in the best possible way.
And is losing weight important? Because people think if you want to be in charge of the country, you need to be in charge of yourself, and that there's an underlying message there.
I think losing weight is all about discipline. So we all know that losing weight is not easy. People don't like talking about it. They don't like to be challenged. But all of a sudden, when we are able to share that we are struggling, that we are thinking about being healthier, and we're showing that discipline, then voters and public really think that if you're showing the discipline, you will be able to also show this in your department or running the country.
And tell me about some politicians who think that it's very good to look a bit orange and have to have very bouncy hair. Is that important?
Well, for some it is. This is something that perhaps they are still working on, but I think it's part of his image, and it's part of something that when people think about that specific politician, we know that there's a lot of orange foundation and over-bleached hair.
John, you've never decided to look orange.
No, I didn't. No, when I was trying to be Prime Minister some years ago now, I was taken off to get some new clothing, and I then discovered it was a great wheeze for the people doing it, because I, of course, I had to pay the proper price for all these things. There was no free clothing in those days in the way there is now. And they got publicity out of it, and it didn't seem to make very much difference to how people perceived me.
Lloyd, how did you find this? Did you think as a Member of Parliament that you needed to present a certain image?
Well, I bought most of my clothes from Next or M&S. That was
the man of the people image.
But that is an image in itself. I mean, I still drive a little red Panda car. I've had 3 of them now, but I just moved to a different little one. And my feeling was in Brighton particularly, you had to show that you were modest in your... My colleague in part of an outer London borough used to say to me, God, if you drove that car in my area, you would be laughed at as not being serious. So different areas will attribute different values to the cars you drive, the clothes you wear, and I think each politician should be aware of that, but shouldn't be bound by it.
And although it's easy to laugh at, actually, for Margaret Thatcher, it was so important and presented an image of strong and bold leadership.
Yes, well, working with her in the early days, she was the first woman Prime Minister, and she really thought she wouldn't be taken seriously. So she had a blank canvas. She could choose what kind of clothing and voice and so forth. But there was a lot of thought went into the shoulder pads, the jackets, and the lowering the voice.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much to Oriana and to John and Lloyd. Earlier today, it was confirmed that the College of Cardinals will gather for the conclave to elect a new pontiff on the 7th of May. However, since the Holy Father died, there has been speculation as to who the next successor to St. Peter will be. The runners and riders come from all over the world, and all sides of the ideological spectrum are represented. The question now is, in what direction does the Catholic Church want to go? The current favourites with the Holy Ghost bookmakers at 9-4 is Italian Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the current Vatican Secretary of State, lauded as a safe, experienced pair of hands, moderate enough to keep the liberal and conservative wings of the Church in harmony. The other front-runners include Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle at 3-1, a Filipino prelate, but rumoured to be a dangerous progressive. Ghanaian prelate, His Eminence Peter Turkson, a renowned theologian, sits at 6-1, having previously been the front-runner after the death of Pope St. John Paul II. At 6-1, and firmly on the left wing, we have His Eminence Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, the Archbishop of Bologna, at 8-1, but rising in probability is the excellent Cardinal Robert Serra of Guinea, a conservative who led his country's faithful through a brutal dictatorship. Then there's the estimable and pious Hungarian, His Eminence Peter Erdo, and he's in the race, reputed to have a great Marian devotion, as did Pope Francis, as well as multilingual abilities. Many are speculating that he could be a surprise result. And finally, the dark horse of the race, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem and Franciscan friar, Italian Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzabella. Pizzabella's a wonderful name, isn't it? Emerging from an embattled Holy Land as a potential successor to the papal throne. But Christendom has not had an English pontiff since Pope Adrian IV, who gave us Ireland in the 12th century, so perhaps it's time for the College of Cardinals to throw their support behind our very own Cardinal Vincent Nichols, Archbishop of Westminster, esteemed and pious as he is, and then we could have fully restored England as Our Lady's dowry, which it was made by Richard II. Well, up next to talk about the weather in Somerset and many other things is the one and only Patrick Christys. Patrick, what's on your programme this evening?
Well, Jacob, fantastic show, fantastic show. You could hardly tell who your favourites for the next Pope were there, so well disguised. But loads on tonight. There's a push to allow everyone in Britain to vote, which sounds great until you realise that that might include illegal migrants, asylum seekers, people who have just arrived here as well. So we're going to be talking about that. I wonder if this ties into Operation Scatter, another thing that's going to feature heavily on my show this evening. And I've got a list of places that Labour and Serco, that company they're outsourcing this to, may well be plonking these illegal migrants into rental accommodation. And we have been to Serco, and we've got a response from them, so I think everyone should watch this space. Strikes, 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 I'm afraid. Will the NHS workers and the teachers join forces to walk out in unison? And I'm also going to be talking about what's going on the continent. Some weird stuff going on there about, power outages. Initially it was some kind of hack, and then now apparently it's an atmospherical event. However, our very own Ben Leo was on the way to Madrid. He's been stranded somewhere in the world, and we're going to go live to him as well. So all of that after your weather, not just in Somerset.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It'll feel like summer over the next couple of days with lots of sunshine, very warm for the end of April, and the winds will be light for most as well. High pressure is the reason why this chunky high dominating our weather patterns. We've had this weather front across northern Scotland. It's breaking up, but still providing some rain and drizzle across the Northern Isles through the night, but tending to clear away from the mainland of Scotland. Generally, it's dry with lengthy clear skies, a bit of a breeze picking up along the south coast. Temperatures will dip down to single figures across parts of eastern England, in particular in rural spots, but many towns and cities holding in double figures. On to Tuesday, and basically sunny and really quite warm sums it up. As I said, there will be this breeze picking up initially on the south coast, Devon and Cornwall, getting quite gusty in the southwest at times, but elsewhere the wind's fairly light. Could be some early morning mist, but generally a sunnier day compared to today for Northern Ireland and much of southern and western Scotland. Still some thick cloud across Shetland, a little bit damp and drizzly here, particularly so in the morning, but even here I suspect that rain and drizzle will tend to fizzle through the day. Lots of sunshine then elsewhere, and with the help of that sunshine getting stronger and stronger, of course, at this time of year, we'll see those temperatures ticking up. A warmer feeling day, particularly where it's sunnier for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but quite widely will be over 20 degrees Celsius, and through central and eastern parts of England, southern Wales, into the mid-20s, perhaps 25 or 26 in and around the London area. Wednesday could be warmer still. Again, a bit of a breeze blowing through the Channel, bit of cloud maybe across Shetland, but not as thick as tomorrow's. Should be a dry day pretty much everywhere, and warmer still with light winds, feeling really warm as well for the last day of April, 26, 27. Warmer again across the south on Thursday.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
On Thursday, the 1st of May, voters across England go to the polls.
In a series of council elections.
Mayoral elections. And one crucial by-election.
They'll vote on the local issues that matter to them and let the parties know where they stand. We'll be here throughout the night.
Live around the country.
As the first results come in.
And from 6 a.m. on Friday morning, as it all becomes clearer, we'll be here to discuss what it means.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive